Hey guys, I just wanted to quickly give a thanks out to everybody who's been watching the channel so far. The regular subscribers who are coming back, I know who you are, and again, thank you so much. I've got a slew of new content coming out, and I'm really going to be happy to share that with you. But for now, let's get into what the F happened to Taki Inoue. For a country that's bought us drifting, Honda, and maid cafes, you'd expect that Japan would have had a bigger impact in Formula 1 than it already has. The depth of talent in that country has been prominent for a while now, due to their love of the motorcar. Strangely, some of the Japanese drivers that have entered Formula 1 have also been some of the worst. Before rejuvenating this channel, I was gonna tap onto one of them, but today, we look at another. Today, we're gonna find out what the f happened to Taki Inoue. Right, so, Taki first started racing competitively in the British Formula 4 Championship in 1988, before racing in the All Japan Formula 3 Championship from 1989 to 1993. Details of these championships back in the day were really minimal, but across those seasons, Taki scored no pole positions, no podiums, no fastest laps, and no wins. So already, we're off to a great start here. Despite spending 5 seasons in Formula 3, getting his ass handed to him by Anthony Reid, Tom Christensen, and Crumb, Taki thought a season in Formula 3000 in Europe would be a challenge worth taking. Driving with Supernova Racing, his teammate would be Vincenzo Sospetti. Now, here's a good time to showcase the contrast between these two lovelies. Sospetti was a driver whom Michael Schumacher described as dominating. He was a world karting champion. He was capable of placing a car high up the grid when it shouldn't have been on the grid at all. He was a highly regarded talent and would eventually make it to Formula 1, driving this thing. But anyway, in the 1994 season, Sospetti would have achieved 1 win, 3 podiums, the fastest lap at Po, and finished 4th in the standings. Taki, well, that's a different story. Taki's best result through the season was 9th place at Estoril. That's it. There is literally nothing more to a season other than that result. So, 3 years of Japanese Formula 3 achieving nothing, and a season in Formula 3000 achieving nothing. So what do you think the next step is, logically speaking, for this young Nihonjin? You're right, Formula 1. Seeing as how 1994 was already so much of a dismal year for Formula 1, it was only fitting that Taki would debut in the premier motor racing category of the world during this time. Predictably, he was extremely slow, clocking a time more than 3 seconds slower than that of teammate David Brabham. But hey, that's only really terrible. The Grand Prix itself would be a chance for him to prove what he's capable of, although the only thing he was capable of was crashing into the pit wall on lap 3. Great start. Not the best of debuts, but that didn't deter this magnanimous, strapping young man from embarking upon his next endeavour into Formula 1. By the start of 1995, Footwork Arrows, which I've always found to be a really odd name, was heading into serious financial strain. Now, the way you counteract this is hiring a driver that's got a lot of backing behind him. So guess who they hired? Now, to partner Taki, Footwork drafted in Gianni Morbidelli. Morbidelli wasn't a particularly special driver, and by that I mean he was pretty decent, but he didn't set the world alight. It would be expected to stay on par with him, but Taki didn't stay on par with him. I'll lay down an example here. In the first race of the season, Morbidelli was 13th in qualifying, and Taki was down in 21st. Doesn't sound like the end of the world, but when you compare the time, the race wasn't much better either, as his engine would blow up on lap 48 of the Grand Prix. Morbidelli, on the other hand, was fighting for points. It was evident from that round alone that the fate of Footwork rested upon the shoulders of Morbidelli. Although that said, Taki was also there to make sure that the team even got there at all. Perks of being a pay driver, I suppose. The rest of the season was essentially the same way in terms of results. The next round in Argentina, he was 10 seconds slower. It's painful to even just say that. Monaco, though, was different. Not in a good way, though. After spinning in practice, Taki was getting a tow back to the pit lane when Jean Ragnotti came through the swimming pool section in the course car, punted Taki's car, and caused the Footwork to roll into the barriers. Of course, Taki was in the car at the time, albeit without his seatbelts on, and was concussed in the accident. This was determined by what was said by Taki in an interview with Top Gear. My helmet was totally squashed. Then I see the doctor. Usual procedure. Then tried to see my dick first, touching my balls. It's true. I learned that in UK. When balls move, brain is fine. When big crash, scissors, take off the overalls, see the balls, hit the balls. Then when balls move, this guy's fine. If balls don't move, then there's a problem with brain damage, I think. So anyway, he was forced to sit out the second part of qualifying, but given his performance in the first part of qualifying, it would have been optimistic to believe he would have been starting anywhere else other than last place. The race wasn't much better either, as he would retire with a broken gearbox. Now, up until this point, Taki had not finished a single Grand Prix that he entered, and most of these retirements were down to his own driving. I'm not saying that it was particularly shocking, but by this stage, to put it nicely, his presence in Formula 1 was being questioned. His next race in Canada was somewhat better, finishing in 9th place. Although I say somewhat better, because teammate Morbidelli was a full lap ahead of him, scoring points. In the next round in France, Taki had taken immense trouble to collide with Ukyo Katayama at the first corner on the first lap, subsequently retiring from the race, an activity that earns no points. For the next round in Britain, the team was in need of another injection of money. Therefore, Morbidelli was given the boot, and Taki was given a new teammate in the form of Max Pappas. Pappas wasn't particularly special either, but having said that, Taki wasn't playing with a full deck, so, I don't know. After being out qualified again, Taki had his usual accident at his usual time slot of around lap 15 to 24. Germany was dismal for both cars with dual retirements, but the next race in Hungary would be momentary elation, followed by utter comedic incompetence. In qualifying, Taki had out-qualified his teammate. Could this be a turning point for Taki? Could this be the day for Taki? Could he possibly score points? Well, on lap 13 of the race, his heart engine, which was about as prone to blowing up as Taki himself was to spinning, expired in a cloud of spectacular smoke. Going off to retrieve a fire extinguisher, Taki demonstrated the importance of looking both ways before crossing the road, even if you weren't on it. Because sometimes, when you have the luck this guy does, you've got to take precautions. But if there's any creme of comfort, he described the landing after he got hit as a 9.99. I suppose he did have one good performance in his Formula 1 career. The next race in Belgium, Taki once again out-qualified Pappas and finished 12th place, whilst Pappas didn't finish at all. Look, I'm not saying these results were any good, but they're better than they were before, right? But in Italy, it didn't go so well. Now, the unwritten rule of motorsport is when you're being lapped, hold your line. In Italy, Taki didn't hold his line. As a result, Damon Hill crashed into Michael Schumacher. But because this made the Ferraris both first and second at the time, Taki immediately became a national hero and an honorary member of the Tifosi, although his race itself was not as successful as Pappas's, who was one lap away from scoring his first points, whilst Taki was yet to score some despite being with the team for 12 races, or what many deemed to be too many. The next two races in Portugal and Germany were not much good. Well, actually, the season as a whole was not much good. But hey, the next round would be in Okayama for the Pacific Grand Prix, home territory for Taki, although the news that Morbidelli would be brought back to the team meant that his qualifying record was going to return to its old ways. But in fairness, he did hold up well against Morbidelli. It's just a shame that the electronics in his car packed up before he could finish the race. Staying in Japan for the Japanese Grand Prix, Taki would once again qualify slower than his teammate. In the final race of the season, after the usual routine of getting trounced in qualifying, Taki had his usual spin at the usual time, whilst his teammate scored the podium. After a horrible season for Footwork, this was just what they needed. Of course, Footwork had no interest in signing Taki on for another season. They needed someone who could pay but drive at the same time. They therefore signed Ricardo Rosset, who was just as inept. As a result, Taki went shopping around for another seat, with teams like Tyrrell. But even with how dire things were at Tyrrell at the time, Ken Tyrrell was about as keen to sign him as he was to contract syphilis. In January, however, Taki announced that he would be driving for the Minardi team, pay driver heaven. But at the last moment, one of his sponsors decided they didn't want to see their signage on a car stranded on the side of the road for an entire calendar year again. And as a result of that, Taki suddenly didn't have the money that was required, and Minardi instead opted for Giancarlo Fisichella, who came in with millions of euros of Italian tobacco money. After racing for a further few seasons in sports cars, Taki walked away from driving duties and now divides his time between Monaco and Japan, coaching drivers from his home country. Whenever he's not doing that, he's getting hammered and shit-talking people on Twitter. And if you follow this cat on Twitter, you know just how much of a laugh he is.
Siri, call my wife.
You have 3 phone numbers for contacts named wife.
In years gone by, he's described himself as the worst Formula 1 driver of all time. Is he though? Well, that's up for debate. Do you guys reckon he is? Or who do you reckon is the worst? Drop your comments down below, guys. For once on this channel, I actually do give a f***.